We're going to walk through this together. All right, what I'm going to do is give you an overview of how to approach the coding, and then we're going to walk through each step. Now, what you're going to see is how I answered the lab for Chapter 7. There are several different ways to do it, and we can talk about those at another time if you want to, or after class. Okay, so this was the assignment, and we need to take a look at it and decide exactly what we need to create. So we know we have 3 different items that we're selling: pie, coffee, and ice cream. And we know what the price of each of those items is. So initially we can think about, we're probably going to need 6 variables to create. All right, and then we read through it and we see that this is a test, but our friend wants to see a printout of what was purchased and what the total cost was. So we should also think probably that we're going to have a costing variable in there somewhere and a grand total in there somewhere. So we're looking at the types of purchases down at the very end. We can have pie and coffee, we can have ice cream and coffee, and we can have all 3 in any combination there. So look through it first and get in your mind what you're going to do. One of the problems that some people have with coding is that they don't want to sit down and they don't want to think about what they have to do. They want to jump into it right away and start banging around on the keyboard, which is the fun part, absolutely. But you need to think about it, you need to make some notes, get your thoughts together before you proceed. So the next step after you think it through would be the pseudocode that we talked about last week. So I know I'm going to have variables, and the variables that I finally came up with are the cost of the pie, the cost of the ice cream, the cost of the coffee, what the purchase cost was, and then what the purchase total was. All right, now notice in my variables, I spell out exactly what it is. We're very fortunate today with our computers that we have enough memory that we can do all of that. So don't abbreviate, ignore the warnings that come up from Windows, and go ahead and spell out exactly what it is. It makes it much, much easier for you when you start to create your code. I then take a look at what I need as far as what I feel I'm going to need as far as headings. So you can go ahead and type these in. I know what's required at the top of each one of the labs I'm going to turn in. And so the first thing I'm going to declare in my program is all the variables that I thought I needed. Next, I'm going to have a main loop, and that loop is what's going to do all the work for me. And under that main loop, there's going to be five different events. Someone chooses pie, if someone chooses coffee, or if someone chooses ice cream. Now I've also added in a dropout event. That's when they're done with their purchase. They want to leave. That's odd. I did that last week too. We're also going to print out whatever the current selection and price is, and then we're going to have a close. We're going to print out what the final total of everything that was ordered. So I'll give you a second to copy this down. There are other ways to do it. I'm walking you through a very simple way that'll help you get the job done. All right, the first thing we need to look at are the variables we're going to create. So we talked about creating the cost variables, and we know the cost from what the tasking was. So the variables we create are a pie cost variable, and that's $2.75, an ice cream cost, and we're going to make that ice cream cost, even though it's an even $2, a float float variable. So we put in the decimal points because we're going to use it with other float variables. So I'm just telling Python what these variables are going to actually be. It knows that each of these are going to be a float. Now, notice also I put in a purchase cost and a purchase total. And even though they do not have a value now, I want to make sure I'm not going to have any problems in my code. So I'm creating those as float values by assigning them 0 value, but I'm including those decimal places. In line 12, we've got purchase in there, and notice I've used double quote marks and no space between those double quote marks. So that in Python is defining purchase item as a character string, but right now we don't have anything assigned to it. And then line 13 is our last variable, and that's called keep buying, and that's a Boolean, so it's set to true. Notice what also is absent there that you might suspect would be there. The name of the item, right? All right. You might think that we want to put pi equals a character string pi. But we really don't need to do that because when we get into our loop, we'll be able to define the image based on what's selected, define that variable. So you'll see that in a second. Let's go to our main loop. Main loop is very simple. Chapter 7 talks to us about several different ways that we can do loops. In this case, I selected the while clause because it's going to be the easiest to work with. Remember we said keep buying was a Boolean that we set to true. So while true, we're going to run through the code that's underneath. Line 17, there's our item purchase that we said was a character string. Remember, raw input is what's going to ask us, what do you want to buy? That's going to print out on the screen. And then we're going to be prompted to enter pie, coffee, or ice cream. You could have done this as a for. You also could have done this as a series of if-else statements. But I think the while statement using a true-false variable is probably the easiest way to do it. This is our first if statement. Notice I've got it labeled as pi. If the item equals pi, remember we use a double equal sign because that's the value we want it to equal. Now, what you might want to consider doing in this instance, somebody may accidentally capitalize the word pi. So notice I used an or modifier and I said or if item purchased equals capital P, pi. Remember the colons after each one of these different conditions. And then line 21 records the cost of our pi because we established that pi cost variable earlier. Okay, so that's our first condition statement. We're looking to find out if the item purchased was pi. Let's go to the ice cream and the coffee statements. And notice how I did ice cream. Again, no underbar. Now, before you start typing, take a look at your pi statement. If you are absolutely, positively sure that it's correct, one of the things that you can do is cut and paste, or copy and paste, for ice cream and coffee. Then all you have to do is go in and change the character strings and the cost variable, and that'll save you some time. Again, it's just thinking it through. What do I need to accomplish? How do I want to accomplish it? Good coders are lazy. They figure out the easiest way to do it, and if it's repeatable, that's exactly what they're going to do. So this is the main part of the main loop that we're looking at. This is where we're actually going to do all the work. Now all we need to do is clean up that main loop, and that becomes pretty simple. We have a dropout line, and that's going to be if they don't enter anything under item purchased, keep buying is going to be turned to false. And what happens then? The routine's over, our main loop is done, and we'll go to close out and print. So this is a dropout line, very simply. By the way, you'll note here that PyCharm kind of puts a little gray squiggly line under our quote marks. It's trying to tell us, hey, did you forget something? It's not red or yellow to give us a caution, but it's just gray as a kind of, hey, what's going on? Did you forget something? And so those gray lines you can kind of ignore, but they're good reminders. All right, the last part that we want to look at is the print the current selection, and this actually finishes up our main loop. And it's pretty easy. You tell them what was selected and you tell them the price. Now, I like to use the format because if I want to do more with this later, I can just modify the format without having to go in and mess with a character string. Remember, those are left and right braces around the 0 and the 1 that we're using. And then look at line 37. What I'm doing is adding the current purchase total and the purchase cost, or the purchase total and the purchase cost together to get a new purchase total. And that's the plus equal sign shortcut that we can use. There is absolutely nothing wrong with saying purchase total equals purchase total plus purchase cost. But again, I'm a lazy programmer. I'm going to learn the shortcuts and use those. The last thing we have to do is close out the program and print the results, and that's really simple. Print your total cost is blank. We're not worried about exactly what was purchased because we've already put that on the screen. So all we're looking at now is the total cost.